My best friend cheated on his girlfriend with me. Although we were drunk, nothing could justify what we did last night. I was guilty of committing a crime I was once pretty sure I wouldn't ever commit. But here I was, and there he was. My best friend and the bane of my existence, Tim Skywalker. He was seated on the chair right in front of my bed, but that wasn't what I was worried about. No, it was his cloth, or lack thereof. He had my bedsheet draped over his naked frame and was avoiding looking anywhere but at me. I wanted him to look at me, mostly because I wanted to see if he was feeling the same emotions that I was. Last night was a mistake. I nearly told him. We were drunk and we didn't know what we were doing, or how we reached my home, or what we did. That also meant that besides feeling bad for Tim's partner, I wasn't really sorry for what happened between us. But there was more to this than my own feelings about it. Tim Skywalker had a girlfriend, and I was the man with whom he had cheated on her with, and we were sure going to pay the price at some point. I decided it was better to deal with that on our own terms, rather than let fate take its course, so I quickly dressed and avoided looking at Tim in return. Tim wasn't really a prude, but he usually avoided talking about anything sex-related. I knew I didn't want to corner or spook him. You should dress too, you'll get a cold. Tim sniffled and rubbed a hand through his curly hair. He looked as distressed as I felt. I understood how this might be affecting him. Even if it was a mistake, it had happened when he was still in a relationship with a woman. Sure, their relationship wasn't on best terms, but he was someone else's. Oh God, he muttered and moaned. I'm sorry, Tim. If I had even a little control over myself last night, I would have stopped us. But we were drunk. We can still talk about it. I have to tell Keira, Tim said, and rubbed his hands over his face. The bedsheet slipped a little from his shoulders, and I pulled my eyes away from the mourning figure he made. I cannot hide this from her. We're going to tell her, I replied and looked at him. Although my eyes slipped over his exposed shoulders a few times, and at the marks I had perhaps left behind last night, I believed I was still able to maintain a cool expression. This wasn't about my obvious crush on him. It was about him and his relationship with Keira. But we need to talk first. What do we have to talk about? He hissed, and finally looked at me. This is one of the few times I'd actually seen him this upset. You know exactly what, I replied gently. We cannot just go and tell her without talking about this first. As much as I know you do not want to keep this between us, we have to be cautious about how we reveal it to her. And how would that be helpful? I tried to keep my words to myself, but I couldn't. You and I know, I began a little more forcefully than necessary, that your so-called girlfriend is a blabbermouth, and it would take her 5 minutes to declare it to the entire school. And wouldn't it hurt your reputation? They already know I'm gay, I replied harshly. Yeah, but they don't know that you're a homewrecker. Fuck you. He got up, hurriedly put on his clothes and left my house. I sat still and wondered, what the heck just happened? Even though Tim and I had zero contact for the next 2 days, irrespective of the number of messages and calls I sent his way, I knew he had informed Keira about the situation. As I had feared, she made it all a public spectacle. I mean, I had expected that, honestly. What Tim and I did was morally wrong, no matter how drunk we were. But that still didn't mean Keira could do what she did. 2 days after that night, during lunch, Keira came to me with heavy steps. I saw the coffee cup in her hand behind her. Tim came rushing in, frantically telling her that it was all right and he was going to make it okay. I noticed the coffee cup in her hand and the expression on her face. I knew what she intended to do, but before I could move or even think, she threw the boiling hot coffee right in my face. What did I do? I screamed, obviously. Fortunately, Tim had the decency to be on my side. He pushed past her, screamed at her, and then dragged me away to the infirmary with the help of my friends. Although the onlookers looked curious, confused, and even upset on my behalf, I knew Keira killed all their sympathy with her next few words. Run away, you cheating fag. He's made my straight boyfriend a fucking faggot. If not for the burning sensation on my face, I really would have snarled at her. Tim Skywalker wasn't straight. He was bisexual, but she probably didn't know that. Tim hadn't told anyone else but me. In fact, if I were to think how my crush on him started in the first place, I would say it was probably right after Tim had confessed about his sexuality and kissed me right after. It was eons ago, however, but that had happened. Half an hour later, I didn't know she'd react like that, Tim began when we walked out of the infirmary. My other friends had left us at my request. I wanted it to end peaceful. I didn't want her to get so violent. If I knew she'd do that, I would have taken some time. You cannot do anything about it now, Tim. It's all right, he sighed. Must be hurting, he said and looked at my face. Kind of, I agreed. I just hope it doesn't leave a mark or something. That'd be a pain. I rubbed a hand over my hair. Honestly, I'm glad it's done. What did she say to you when you told her? It doesn't matter. Everything's over. Well, I'll assume it's good that you're free from that maniac. He gave a rueful smile. I know Keira isn't the best person to be with, but it was my fault. It could have ended better. Yeah, I murmured. Hey, do you want to go out to eat? We can talk. Instead of going to any proper place, we decided to hang around the street stalls. It was best, he said, for privacy and open space. We each bought our snack and stood leaning against the stair railing. There were a few people around us, so we didn't need to shout a lot. As he ate his cheesesteak, I watched him in silence. A few weeks ago, still 2 months into this relationship with Keira, he had come to my place bawling in tears. I hugged him and asked what happened. He said he couldn't handle being with Keira anymore, and that their personalities didn't match at all. I told him the same thing a long time ago, and he was dying to reply, I told you so. But I held my tongue. I asked what had happened now, and he simply replied that it was hard being with her. Keira had apparently ridiculed his choice of career in front of her equally annoying parents. As always, I advised him to break up with her. He said he would think about it, but then the next day, I still saw him hanging around her. His clinginess to her made me jealous, but nothing that I couldn't overlook for him. Now he was here. We have to be a little aware of our surroundings, though, he said. Oh, why? I bit into my burrito. Keira's got 2 brothers. They're huge. Oh, I replied and swallowed. Shit. Shit indeed. Messing with a woman with 2 brothers was never a good idea, even if it was done unintentionally. 2 days later, he came over to my place and asked if I could help him with his assignments. It was math, his least favorite subject. It wasn't my favorite either, but I did it better than him. I invited him hoping that the awkwardness about the drunken night wouldn't return, but I was wrong. Halfway through the assignment, I realized how close we were seated. Soon after I did, he seemed to realize the same. He looked at me from the corner of his eyes and asked if I wanted to drink some coffee. I said I had enough of it on my face and I wasn't interested in drinking. He gave a little chuckle, stood up, and left for my kitchen. From where I was seated, I could see him shuffling through the kitchen and making himself some coffee. I guess it was the ease with which he conducted himself in my place that I was once again reminded of my crush on him. We seemed to move naturally. We had been best friends since 8, and now we were here. I decided then that I wasn't going to leave him no matter what happened. We were sure going to come as a pair wherever life took us. He came back with his coffee and we returned to his assignment. Eventually, the conversation reached Keira. It started with him asking about my face. It's a lot better, I replied. I still have some difficulty speaking, but it's alright. I leaned against the couch and looked at him in curiosity. You didn't tell me. Are you guys done for real? Yeah, he answered, and stopped writing. Wasn't that what you wanted? He grinned at me. I won, but at what cost? The words were out of my mouth long before my mind processed what I was even saying. Well, at least now you know what it feels like to sleep with a gay guy. An awkward silence followed my confession. It was almost like I was set on keeping things as awkward between us as possible. It was a shame I didn't know how to keep my mouth shut. What the hell was wrong with me? Instead of replying morosely, Tim shifted a little and nodded. It was different, but I liked it, I think. You think? I teased him, even though my face was burning hot. His face got redder than before. What do you want me to say? I don't remember much. He shrieked out a laugh, and I did the same. Well, at least things seemed like they would return to normal. 3 hours later, I yawned and stretched a little. Night had fallen, and we were nearly done with all the assignments. Tim looked more dead than me, but he kept on going. He told me his assignment was due tomorrow. Procrastination had always been his strong suit, not mine. So when he said that he would continue the rest of the assignment after a short nap, I didn't let him lie down. No, I will not let you put it all on my shoulders. I am not forcing you to do anything, he whined, and tried to lie down. I kept my hold around his arms. If he lay down even for a minute, he was sure as hell going to miss the deadline. He often regretted that after he'd done it. He never learned from it, though, and that's why it was important to make sure that he didn't lie down. Let me sleep. No, I answered, and grabbed the back of his neck to pull him up. Charles, he warned. What, you little musket? Let me sleep, or what? I challenged, and dropped my hold on his arm to grab his pen. What? I'll kiss you. My hold around his neck and pen slipped. I couldn't help it. I was shocked. He seemed to notice that. He gave me a smug smile and lied down on the carpeted floor. My face was flushed red, and I wanted him to kiss me. Heck, if he kissed me right this second, I was sure to let him know about my crush on him. Let me sleep now, he smugly said, and lied down. Uh-huh. Where was my kiss? He seemed to understand the rushing thoughts in my head. He cracked his fingers and put his arms behind his head to stare better at the ceiling. He looked dreamy, and, not for the first time, I was struck by the fact that such a beautiful person was my best friend. My crush on him made so much sense to me. Remember the first time we kissed? He asked, and finally found my eyes. Yeah, I answered, and lied down next to him. You just told me you were bi. I still feel sorry for giving you the shock of your life. Well, at least I found out I like guys, so thank you, I grinned at him. Have you ever wondered what it would have been like had we dated after that? He suddenly asked, his words now lulling. It was like he was sleepy, but not so. I could feel the erratic breathing of my heart. I swallowed and willed away the awareness before Tim could notice. In response, I shook my head. I couldn't trust my voice right now. I couldn't deal with the fact that I'd been harboring a crush on him for years now. You were busy hiding it away. It was a low blow, but it was the truth. Tim had discovered very early in his life that he liked both guys and girls, but he couldn't really come to terms with it. Not that he hated that part of him, but he always did his best to avoid it. He played ignorant to the truth and dated girl after girls, dispelling any crush he had on men. So, yes, my pointing out that was a low blow. Well, he said and licked his bottom lip. Still don't wanna, and there it was. The sentence that affirmed my belief that nothing was to come out of that drunken, albeit scandalous night. How often did best friends sleep with each other anyway? And how many ended up dating or doing it again? Yes, the chances were as rare as they could be. I squashed the searing disappointment in my head and gave a small chuckle in response. Figured that much, I added. Not with you, though, he replied, and looked at me again. Now whatever does that mean? I sighed and draped my hand over my forehead. This way, Tim wasn't entirely visible to me, although I could still feel his body heat. Hey, let's finish your assignment. What if I really kiss you? He asked. I would tell you not to do anything that you'd regret. My heart had started beating again. It was insane how Tim could control my emotions with a few words. You don't even have the guts to discuss that night. Well, he said and sat up. Thankfully, despite my biting remark, he did not look offended or hurt. Maybe it was because he knew that was the truth. What exactly is there to talk about? You and I got drunk at a party, kissed, and then slept together. I do not assume drunk best friends sleep with each other, but we did, he said. Does that mean we're not best friends, or... I asked you a simple question, Charles. I swallowed. What was Tim playing at? Was this the same guy who couldn't even look at me in the eye the morning after? The same one who avoided me like the plague for 2 days? I was upset that I was still not able to tell him I liked him, like romantically liked him, and not just like a friend. No, I answered bitterly. It was an effort to lie. My entire body knew I wanted to kiss the hell out of him. Okay, wow, he replied and grabbed his notebook. Let's finish the assignment. I sat up and grabbed his book. The silence between us lasted about 5 minutes before I sighed, dropped the book and kissed him. Thankfully, Tim was still in the mood to kiss me too. He held onto my cheek as I held onto his waist, so I realized this was it. Several hours later, Tim was lying on the bed and I was on the sofa when I asked him about Keira. Do you still like her? I asked finally. Keira was a headache, but she was still capable of being a nice girl. I had yet to apologize to her, but I wondered if it'd mean anything after that coffee incident. It wasn't like she'd apologized for her very sober behavior, and honestly, I knew she wouldn't either. In her mind, that was probably justice done. In a way, perhaps, it was. I had made her boyfriend gay. I couldn't roll my eyes any harder. Does she know? About what? Tim asked as he skimmed through the magazine in his hands. It was very late. We should have gone to sleep now, but I guess we still had some untapped energy left in us. And although we were scared to give it into it, I wasn't letting us sleep. And no, I don't like her, not romantically at least. About you being bi, I said, a little relieved that I didn't have any competition. I heard Tim closing the magazine first before I saw him opening his mouth. I don't want anyone to know about it, Charles. Okay, I said, and raised my hands at him. I get it. Thanks. He returned to shuffling through his magazine. So we kiss. Now what? Tim sighed. Don't people go on dates or something after they kiss? I perked up and finally sat up on the sofa. What the hell? Tim looked up with a smile. Where are you taking me first? 5 days later, my first date idea with Tim was to annoy him. So I took him for a run, and not exactly for a fun little run, but a marathon. I turned out to find him doing his best to catch up. Tim had good health, but his stamina was shit. I knew of a place just 15 minutes away that served the best coffee and desserts. We were going there right after this. I will kill you, he hissed. You don't have to agree. I was okay only until you said it was just a marathon, not a date. It's for a good cause, Timmy, he swatted my hand away. Don't call me that. I'll feel like I'll die. 10 minutes more, I encouraged him. You'll do just fine. He did just fine. When we finally reached the end and he threatened to drop dead on the spot, I grabbed him around the waist and dragged him away. He wasn't going to die in a public place. I had to make sure of that. I brought him to the nearest bench and helped him sit down. There were many people around us, and so were many lemonade stands. I told him to wait. Here, I said, and gave him a glass of lemonade. I hate you so much. I'm going to kill you. Even then, he took the glass and glared a small thank you at me. It was easy reading him. He was like an open book to me, nice and pretty as he was. I know a cafe here, I said, and pointed in a direction. Very good. I know Kim's, Charles. Oh God, you're a loser. 3 days after that first date, I found Keira sitting on the bleachers. She was with some of her friends I knew, and all of them were glaring at me. I knew what they were talking about and what they were here for, so I kept my game on. I wasn't going to neglect my team for some pissed-off psycho. I'd already apologized to Keira twice, once verbally and another time with a few notes, mostly because Tim had asked me to. Although I was still apologetic about how the relation came to an end. An hour later, when we finally finished the game, Keira was still sitting there. I sighed and bid my team members goodbye before walking towards her. If she wanted another apology, I was going to give it to her. Anything to get off her backs. Nothing that happened that night was a conscious decision. What do you want? I asked. What do I want? She said in a mocking tone. I don't know. I just hate you. I raised my hands in surrender. And I deserve that. Wow, you're so sorry, I sighed. If there's nothing you want, then I'll go. Should I tell everyone to keep their boyfriend away from you because everything you touch becomes a little faggot? I didn't reply to anything. That was a typical homophobic comment. I'd known of that for some time now. I should have known from the start, though. There was always something off about him. She stood up and crossed her arms over her chest, and so did her friends. No wonder staying with you made it worse. I didn't make anything worse. You're just stupid. Don't call me that, she hissed. Right, I glowered. I'm glad he's off your hook now. You're just mean-spirited human. You've always been one, actually. Stop insulting me, cheater. Right when he said he's got a gay best friend, I should have known better than to date him. But now I'm going to tell everyone he cheated on me with a guy. It's embarrassing. The girls around her mumbled in horror, gasping and shit. I rolled my eyes. Pathetic, honestly. What we did was a mistake, and I have already apologized. I know an apology will not make it better, but can you not make it worse? We were drunk. We didn't know what we were doing. Yes, you wouldn't know if you were sleeping with a girl or a boy, right? I huffed, and stepped away. Whatever you want to do, you have your own will. Oh, I will. You wait. When I was walking away, she ran after me and shoved at my back. Thanks to my balance, I only stumbled a little. I glared at her, and she returned with another glare. It was hard to imagine she was the same girl I had met some months back. Keira then was a different Keira. Was it the cheating that made her so? Or was she always like that? Several hours after that interaction, when I informed Tim about it, he shook his head and confirmed that Keira had always been like that. When I told him how she had behaved, he nodded his head. He didn't look surprised. When I first started dating her, one of her brothers had sneaked into my home in the middle of the night to threaten me. What the actual heck? I said. Tim had never told me about any such thing. He nodded his head. That's why I don't want to be with her anymore. But I wasn't really sure how to get out of it. Her brothers are scary. Why did you never tell me about it? Charles, I wasn't sure how to react to it. I didn't want to stress you. You should have told me. Jesus. I rubbed my hands over my face. What if in their so-called loyalty to their sister, they'd actually hurt him? I wouldn't even have found out about it until it was too late. It's alright, just ignore her. She's insane. But the warning came late. Apparently, I had pissed her off a lot during that little interaction. One of the days of my basketball practices, her two brothers cornered me. They looked much older than any on-campus student I'd ever met and were as bulky and as tall as us. They asked if I was Charles. I wearily answered that I was. The word wasn't even out of my mouth before one of them landed a punch on my face. Before I could recover, I felt another punch on me. It hurt so much that I couldn't even tell where I had come from. If not for my guys and the guards, they would have beaten me to a pulp. Perhaps that was their intention. Thankfully, the two men were taken away and I was merely called by the concerned college authority to talk about the incident. Before talking to them, I talked to Tim. He rushed into the building when I informed them about the incident and touched my poor face to check for major injuries, as if they weren't visibly obvious right away. I cringed a little when he accidentally touched a particularly sore spot. Maybe she hates losing you to a handsome guy, I joked. He carefully rubbed a clear patch of skin on my forehead before ruefully nodding. Hey, I said and grabbed his hand. I'm okay. I'm not going to die. This shouldn't have happened. He was avoiding my eyes now, just like the morning after. I wouldn't be surprised if it was because he felt guilty about this. It's not because of you. I will prove it to you. And I did. Keira was suspended for 2 weeks and given a warning by the college. The words around the college said she was sure to lose some grades in 2 of her subjects. There was no way I could confirm that, but at least she was not getting off easily. Well, it was the same for us. Apparently, right after getting suspended, Keira's friends took it up upon themselves to avenge her. Dutifully, they spread the word around about Tim and my night. That so meant Tim was forced to come out. 2 days later, it was Tim's presentation day, and he was unwilling to attend his class. The sole reason behind that was obviously the words around the campus, and the stink eye everyone past him and me now. It wasn't very serious, but most students of our year knew about that night. They didn't know anything else, but that the 2 best friends had slept together while one of them was in a relationship with a girl. And scandalous it was. The hate spread around among the students like wildfire. Although thankfully, we didn't really face serious consequences. Some mockery, yes, and some not so hushed insults, but it was mostly okay-ish. People had other things to worry about, but Tim had taken this to heart and feared walking into the campus. It was weird how a single drunken mistake led to this. Tim, I said and knocked on his bedroom door. You'll get late. I don't want to go, he cried from the other side. And then what, fail the semester? I will not fail it. I will do well in the written exam. Yes, but physicals carry a different set of scores. You and I know very well that if you fail in that, you'll fail in the entire subject. And if you fail the subject, you'll fail the I stopped when Tim snapped the door open to glare at me. Can you shut up and be helpful? I am being helpful, I said, desperately, and checked the time. He only had 30 minutes left for the class, and his roll number was 10. He had to get there soon. I want to graduate with you. He sighed. People are talking, he said. People are always talking, I told him. You and I are the hot topics right now. Tomorrow it will be someone else. What can we do about it but accept it? I didn't want them to know this way. I'm sorry, I said, and genuinely meant it. Coming out was difficult as it was, but forcefully being outed? Yes. I didn't know how that felt, but you cannot let that stop you from your studies. You know you've prepared a lot for it. Don't let it go to waste. You don't want to sit through Mr. Lawrence's lectures again, do you? I remember how much you complain about him. Tim groaned. I hate Mr. Lawrence. I cannot stand him. Exactly, I said, and slowly brought my hand to his face. His face was flushed red right now, so it felt soft and hot under my calloused hand. So just go and give it your best, Tim. We can go out and eat something then. What do you say? He sighed and leaned against the wall for support. How am I going to tell my parents about this? That's a concern for another time. Come on, let's go. He bit his bottom lip and nodded when he turned to leave. I grabbed his hand. You know, I'll be there when you tell your parents about this. Thanks, Charles. I love you. And there was a smile in his voice, finally. I love you too. We took my bike to the campus to make it quick. By the time we reached the building, the lecture had already started. We waited for the lift, but it didn't seem to come anytime soon. The only option left was the stairs. Tim glowered at that option, but I grabbed his hand and dragged him up the stairs. It was only the 7th floor. We were going to make it. I could hear him huffing and puffing behind me, but I was glad to hear his little laughs as well. It was funny to him, and so it was to me. When we reached there, I took deep globs of air and pushed his hair with my fingers. He looked messier than me. I hoped he hadn't forgotten whatever he had prepared. "Go," I said, still huffing a little. He nodded and turned to leave. Then he stopped and turned to me. "What?" I asked. "Did you forget something?" "My God, Tim, I swear to..." I stopped when he hugged me and leaned up to kiss me. "Thank you," he said. I laughed a little. "Welcome, Tim." "You know," he began and pulled away from me, "I'm glad that night happened." I looked into his eyes and swallowed. "Well, I'm glad too. I was sure there was no way he didn't know I had a crush on him. I mean, the twinkle in his eyes when he analyzed my face confirmed that, but I also believe that we were past that." Conclusion. The words around the campus died down soon enough. People seemed to forget everything quickly. It was almost like our attention span resembled that of a goldfish. But I wasn't complaining. In fact, I was glad that there were fewer people discussing Tim and me. It made it easier to walk around the campus freely and stress-free. Tim still hesitated in attending classes, but overall, he was doing well. On top of that, we started dating as well. Well, in private, but I was glad to have that even. And oh, I told him about my age-old crush on him. Thankfully, Tim only giggled in response and said he knew about it. The end. Have you ever heard absurd getting together stories? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become part of our Rainbow Force and stay wholesome.